But step 4 says the inventory is ours. This is a life-changing. These revelations, as we read in this big book, if you really take them into your heart, are life-changing. Don't just think of them intellectually. I mean, sometimes we could read these things 100 times, and it just doesn't make any sense. So if we go to page now 413, if you have your big book there, and it says in the last paragraph on page 415, in the hospital, he still hung on to the idea I had most of my life. You know how difficult it is for change, having that spiritual awakening. It's simple, but it's not easy, that transformation. If I could just control the external environment. Wow, that says it all. How many of you sitting here, your lives are trying to control the external environment? And how did that work? I used to see this guy and had problems, used to talk to him, and he'd always say to me, after I tell him all about my problems and how I'm going to resolve them, tell these people off and do this and do that. He said, well, how's that working out for you? So you got to ask in your life, how's it working out for you? If you have a problem with somebody at work, how's it working out for you? Doing it the way you've been doing it time and time again. And we're so miserable, and irritable and discontent, depressed, anxious, right? So here it goes. If I could just control the external environment, the internal environment would become comfortable. If everybody else would just act the way I felt they should, wow, my life would be great. It would be unbelievable, right? Just imagine that. So I wanted everybody to act a certain way because I knew how people should act. So he felt his thinking was like mine was. And then I wondered why I was so depressed and upset when somebody looked at me the wrong way, or say, example, we're talking about a boss at work said something to me. I took it personally. Well, it had something to do with me, because if I didn't straighten him out and he didn't act the way I wanted, I'd be upset. This spiritual awakening, this spiritual change, transformation comes when we start to realize and we start to see God and higher consciousness, and we see the love, patience, and tolerance, which was in there all the time. But we decided in our lives we were going to use the intellect, the ego, making it all, carrying the world around on our shoulders, making it all about us. When somebody looked at us, most of the time it says in here, it was in illusions and delusions. Most of the time people didn't mean anything, like they might just have a dry sense of humor trying to be funny. We took it personally. And even if they did mean it, what is it, how crazy it is for us to bring it and make it part of us. Hurt people hurt people. When somebody gets in your face, they're upset, yells at you, tries to get you upset, tries to control you, we can only sit there and smile, it says in this book. When we have that change of thinking, that comprehension. There's a sick man, they say. But before, how sick was I when I reacted to everybody and everything? They controlled me in my life. I want to be free. I didn't understand what freedom was, but here in this book it tells you real freedom. So it says on the bottom of page 415, right on page 414. Okay. So on page 414, in the middle of the first part of the page, it says, but we have turned our will and our lives over to the work and the care of God. Okay? So when we use the word God here, in our steps it talks about a higher consciousness, right? The old way, the ego was lower level. It was so finite and small. It was all about us, and we were trying to control everything. But when we want to, I'd be resentful. I'd get in my car, it'd be a beautiful day out, or even, I didn't even want to see the sun. But when I get out of the self and get out of the resentment, anger, and fear, because it's not about me anymore, and step 2 said we had to be restored to sanity. But this is step 3, giving our lives over to this higher consciousness, a source. It was in there all the time. We just blocked it out. We blocked out what's called the sunlight of spirit. So he goes on to say, each with other, as a witness, we took the 3rd step. God, I offer myself to thee. The first phrase alone, get out of the self, out loud, just as it says in the big book. And life kept on getting simpler and easier as we try to reverse my old idea. My old idea, ego, easing God out, all about me. Spiritual transformation is when God consciousness, spirituality, blissfulness, when we see the universe and the vibrations around us and have love for people. So people could try to push our buttons, get in our face, but we have what's called love and tolerance. They're hurt people. Hey, if their day was going well and they just learned they won the lottery, they'd come over and give us a hug. But we have to have understanding, compassion, right? So when we do that, we have that transformation and we see life differently. Reverse my old idea by taking care of the internal environment. All the change and the whole perception change. The answer isn't going, and I always use the example, man who climbs Mount Everest to be happy. These are momentary pleasures. Getting people to like us, wanting people to treat us the right way is momentary. If that's the way we base our lives, if we go, say, into a meeting, say it's an OA, AA meeting, whatever kind of meeting, and we want people there to react and like us, we're miserable. We should be able to go into a room, go into a job, go into a situation where everybody says they hate me, right? What does it have to do with anything? I could sit there and be happy and joyous and free. But you know what? When we change, our perception changes, the world around us changes. I mean, how much can a person yell at you if you just sit there and are happy and smile? They're looking for a reaction, and if we don't give them resistance, if you don't give resistance, right? We stop. Step 10 promises say we stop fighting anyone or anything, right? We stop fighting anyone or anything. So the whole situation is this: when we stop fighting anyone or anything through this spiritual awakening, our life changes. It goes on to say, by taking care of the internal environment via the 12 steps and letting the external environment take care of itself. Look, the external environment life will go on without us. When I'm gone from here, I always wonder, who's going to do this, who's going to do that? Life will probably go on a lot better when I'm not here, and I'm sure it does, because anytime I put my 2 cents in, it doesn't matter. If you want to put your 2 cents in, they say the only way to show people something is by example. Example is the only way. There's no other way. So when you're happy, freedom, and joyous, and you get this into your heart, the people around you can't help but change. And I always say, though, if they don't want to change, that's fine with me too. Let them act the way they want. My happiness is not going to depend on people outside of me. The clerk in the store, the guy who cuts me off on the highway. It's ridiculous. It's the old way of thinking. The lower level. We were made in a higher power, God's image, to be happy, joyous, and free, to be ecstatic. To appreciate this wonderful world we're in, not to go around with, it says in our book on page 64, resentment is the #1 killer. It brings us to our addictions, to the food, the alcohol, and all of these things. So all of these problems, I'm talking here about a solution here to the way we live life, and that all is related to our addictions, and our addictions are related to everything else in our life. So on page 415, it goes on to say, okay, on the bottom of the page, today there's nothing in the world more important to me than my keeping this alcoholic sober. Not taking a drink is by far the most important thing I could do each day.